Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar on the NCAA Mind Matters Challenge. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for your time. My name is Katie Shapiro, and I will be your host and moderator for this webinar. So there will be 5 parts to this webinar, and now we'll briefly go through the agenda. First, we'll be providing a speaker introductions. Then we'll provide an overview of the challenge, and then after that we'll present the frequently asked questions of the challenge, and then we'll work through the live audience Q&A. To participate in the live Q&A, please submit your questions at any time during the presentation through the Q&A chat box. We will collect and present these questions during the live Q&A section. If we don't answer your question live, please note that we will be transcribing and answering all questions asked during the session and then posting them on the challenge forum at a later date. Finally, we'll wrap up with some information on what you can do today for the challenge, including where to register, how to stay connected, and then also how to submit your proposal. Now I'm pleased to welcome the following speakers to our webinar this morning. From the NCAA, we have Dr. Brian Hainline, Chief Medical Officer, and Emily Crocius, Postdoctoral Research Fellow for the NCAA Sports Science Institute. And then from Ninth Signal, we have Alice. I'm going to give a quick housekeeping note. At any time, if you hear some background noise, please check your phone and make sure that you are muted. You can press *6 on your phone to ensure that you're muted, just in case the background noise becomes so bothersome that we won't be able to hear the speakers. Thank you. So moving on, today, as I said, the topic of today's webinar is the Mind Matters Challenge. Dr. Brian Hainline will now speak to the details of the challenge. And Brian, you are all set to go.
Good morning, everyone. This is Brian Hainline, Chief Medical Officer of the NCAA, and thank you for joining us. So we're talking today about a part of a much larger study that the NCAA and the Department of Defense are sponsoring. And that's called the NCAA Department of Defense Grand Alliance, which has 2 parts to it. One is a prospective longitudinal clinical study, which is the largest study ever done in the history of concussion. And the answer that we're trying to find out is what's the natural history of concussion. But just as importantly, and this is pertinent to today's talk, is we're launching a Mind Matters Challenge, because even if we understand all of the research about concussion, we need to really try to shift the behavior and the culture around concussion. We really need to make concussion so that it's a condition that everyone takes as seriously as an eye injury or a knee injury, and that everyone's on the same page and understands that this is indeed a brain injury and we need to understand it and take it seriously. So that's what the Mind Matters Challenge is all about. And it comes into really 2 parts. So the first part of the Mind Matters Challenge is that we're undertaking a research challenge. It's called Changing Attitudes About Concussion in Young and Emerging Adults. This is really a longer-term project. It's probably going to roll out over 3 to 5 years. And in this, we're asking researchers to really give us the methodologies, the proof, or the mechanisms that we can say, if we utilize these, we are going to change the culture, the perceived norms about concussion. But also a very important short-term project is an educational program challenge. It's called Educational Programs Targeting Young and Emerging Adults. And here we're looking for individuals, companies, entities that have the expertise and capacity to really give us compelling material. So based on what we are right now, based on what we know, give us some great ideas, demonstrate to us how you can really, through education, have a tremendous impact on student athletes and other at-risk populations. Because even while we're waiting for the research to come in, we at the NCAA and working with the Department of Defense, we plan to utilize materials in the very near future to already begin our important work about educating all of the stakeholders regarding concussion.
Thank you so much, Brian. So now we're going to hear from both Eloise Young and Emily Kirchis, who will now go through the specifics of the two parts of this challenge. So first we'll hear from Eloise.
Thanks, Casey. So, as Brian just said, in the first part of the challenge, the research challenge, the NCAA would like to give out a maximum of 10 research grants to different groups and institutions that have compelling ideas and compelling methodologies to understand how to change the attitudes and behaviors of college student athletes. My colleague Emily will talk more about that, about what they're looking for, some of the thought behind that, but for me I'm just going to talk about some of the administrative details. So for this part of the challenge, a maximum of 10 research grants, each at a maximum of $400,000, will be awarded by the NCAA and the DoD to fund targeted research to look at how to change behavior with regards to concussion and concussion education for college student athletes. Now, groups that are involved and that submit don't have to come from a single institution. And so if you already collaborate with colleagues from another school or from another department, we would certainly welcome proposals that are submitted from more than one institution. So those, we'll go into some more of the commonly asked questions and details for this research challenge later. I want to turn it over now to Emily and let her talk about some of the thoughts behind this research challenge.
Emily, please feel free to go ahead. Emily? I apologize.
Hi.
Emily, are you able?
Yes.
There you go.
Can you hear
Sorry
me
about that. Yes, we can.
So the goal of the research challenge is to take several steps back and really think hard about the types of factors that are influencing concussion safety behaviors. And the ultimate goal of this is to use this information to develop really comprehensive strategies to change the culture of concussion safety in sport and the military. So doing this successfully requires conceptualizing the range of factors at multiple levels that are influencing safety behaviors. The social ecological model that's on the slide is one that I found useful in helping guide thinking about the range of different influences that there could be on safety behaviors. The competitive proposals certainly don't have to deal with every level of influence on safety behaviors, but they are encouraged to demonstrate an awareness of how their submission fits into this broader context.
Thank you so much, Emily. Now we'll turn it back to Eloise to go through the Educational Programs Challenge.
Thanks, Casey. So as Brian mentioned a few slides ago, the second topic, the Educational Programs Challenge, is designed to meet a more immediate short-term goal to identify groups and organizations that can produce educational programs to help disseminate the information about concussion awareness and concussion education. So unlike the first topic, where the NCAA was looking to fund research, this topic is it's structured a little bit differently. So up to 10 of the most interesting respondents will receive a $25,000 cash prize each. And what we're looking for from these respondents is evidence that they can reach the target community. We're looking to see that they have ways of focusing their message to different subsegments of the target population. And additionally, those groups that are selected to win these cash prizes will have the opportunity to present a demonstration of their approach and potentially have the opportunity to do further work with the NCAA. And then again, I'm going to turn it over to Emily and let her talk about some more of the specifics.
Emily,
all right. So even though there's a lot of work to be done to understand the full range of factors that influence concussion safety behaviors, and that work is going to be done through the research challenge, there is existing evidence right now about some of the factors that are important to include in concussion education. And perhaps even more importantly, there's a lot of information out there about what educational approaches to date have not worked. So successful, innovative proposals for the Educational Programs Challenge need to be sure to build on this existing evidence, or at least demonstrate an awareness of how they're, of its existence and how what they're doing is kind of innovating from there. Proposals also need to be clear about the distal outcomes they're trying to change. And it's not clear from the existing evidence that changing concussion knowledge alone is sufficient for changing safety behaviors. So proposals are encouraged to think really hard about the outcomes that they're saying their program is targeting, how they'll be measured, and what mechanisms are implicit in their programming and how they're ostensibly targeting these outcomes. Successful proposals should also demonstrate an awareness of the types of barriers that could limit the effectiveness of the education they're proposing in their target audience.
Great, thank you so much, Emily and Eloise. Now, Eloise is going to take you through the schedule, the process, and criteria for this challenge. As a reminder, all of this information is on the challenge website and can be accessed at any time by going to 9sites.9sigma.com/web/NCAA-mind-matters-challenge. Don't worry, that will be up on it, slides at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to remember it, but I just wanted to present that information now. So now we'll go ahead and take it over to Eloise for the rest of this information.
Thanks so much, Casey. So I know this slide has a lot of information on it, and I'm going to try to walk us through it so that we can hit all of the highlights. So both of the topics, the long-term research challenge and the more short-term educational program challenge, are running simultaneously. They both launched before the holidays, and they both have the same deadline of January 29, 2015. For the research challenge, this deadline represents the deadline to submit a non-confidential 4- to 6-page overview of what you would do. Now, we've received some questions at the forum about what does 4 to 6 pages mean. For those of you who have actually clicked through and looked at the response form, you'll see that the response form is actually broken out into fields where you can either cut and paste or compose directly into those fields. And, you know, 4 to 6 pages is meant to serve as a guideline so that you have an understanding of about how much information to provide. Something to keep in mind is that funding decisions are not made based on these phase 1 submissions. So the most compelling submissions will be, those groups will be invited to participate in phase 2. Those groups will be contacted and will be invited to submit a comprehensive proposal. And those comprehensive proposals will be due sometime in July over the summer of 2015. So again, phase 1 is really, the goal here is for groups that are interested in the research challenge to put forth top level, what's your idea, how do you propose to, demonstrate this, how are you going to measure success. We're not looking for a full-on proposal. Those of you who present the most interesting ideas will be invited then later to provide this comprehensive proposal upon which funding decisions will be made. Now, the Educational Program Challenge is running simultaneously but has a slightly different structure. So the deadline is the same, January 29th, to submit a proposal for the type of work you do, how you would present and develop an educational program targeted towards college student athletes and other young and emerging adults of that same age group. The top 10 respondents will receive a cash prize and will be invited to participate in phase 2. If you choose to participate in Phase 2, you'll receive a $75,000 production budget to assist in creating a demonstration of your proposed approach. And additionally, those groups that are invited and choose to participate in Phase 2 will receive an information packet from the NCAA that discusses some of the constraints regarding the program demonstration. So they might, select a specific target demographic, and, you'll be required to focus towards that target. So again, the difference between the two is one is to look for a potential partner to develop short-term research educational programs, and the other one is looking for long-term research efforts. Okay, so if we move to the next slide, I want to talk about some of the criteria for the research challenge. And I know I'm blowing through a lot of information very quickly, so I want to emphasize again what Casey said, which is that all of this information is available at the website. So, if you are having questions about this or somehow you're not able to jot down things as quickly as I can talk, no fear. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded and the transcript will also be posted at the forum. Okay, so moving back to the criteria for the research challenge. So the things against which a Phase 1 submission will be evaluated include maturity of the proposed approach, the submitter's experience in research or educational programs that target attitudinal change or behavior change, the scientific background that's supporting your proposed approach, what are your metrics for success, and can you talk about previous examples in which you have successfully reached the target demographic? Finally, what is the expertise, the breadth of experience of your team? And actually, I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask Emily to kind of chime in to see if she has anything that she wants to kind of further comment on or augment.
There's nothing else I'd like to add at this time, but I'm happy to take questions later.
Okay, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. All right, so next, we'll talk about the criteria for the educational programs topic. So for this topic, the Phase 1 submissions are going to be evaluated against these 4 bullets. So what is the validity of your proposed approach relative to the target demographic? And, the NCAA already engages in outreach. And what they're really looking for is to see what's new, what's different. And so a really important criteria will be the amount of creativity or the level of innovation that's associated with your approach. What makes this be new and different? And again, just like for the research programs challenge, what are some examples of previous successes that you've had in reaching similar target audiences? And finally, the technical capabilities, the resources, and the expertise of the team that is being proposed to provide these educational programs.
Great. Thank you so much, Eloise. Now we'll head back to Brian for his insight on why solution providers should be interested in this challenge. So, Brian, go ahead. Brian, are you still on the line?
Whoops. Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted as well. Separately.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, so thank you. So this is really an incredible opportunity, I think, for everyone, because we're really going to be changing society. I think that, again, coming back to when I spoke originally about the Grand Alliance, the research study itself is going to really shift our understanding of concussion. And when you couple this with the educational paradigms we're hoping to obtain, it's going to be a game changer. And so as a participant, you have the opportunity to really develop some very interesting research. you own that research. We will help support you in that research, and your name will get out there. And more importantly, I think the most important thing is you're really going to be helping all of our student athletes and our military servicemen and women who are at risk of developing head injury, and we're going to not only minimize that risk, but we're going to find ways to make their management much better, and ultimately, we're really going to shift the culture of what's happening.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the challenge FAQs, which is obviously the questions that come up most frequently during this challenge. So Eloise and I will go ahead and take you through these now. So the first one, do I have to be affiliated with an NCAA member institution or be collaborating with one to participate in either challenge?
And this is Eloise. So the answer is no. Both these topics are open to anybody, anywhere. So the NCAA is interested in hearing from anyone who has a great idea. So you don't need to be part of an NCAA member institution. You don't need to affiliate with one in order to participate. You don't need to be from North America. If you have great research to propose or a great way to reach the college student athlete and you are located in Switzerland or in Shanghai, we would love to hear from you.
So number two, am I still eligible to participate if I reside outside of the United States?
And apparently I just leaped ahead and answered the second question. So, and again, the answer is yes, you are. We are really looking for international, global participation.
Great. So two of the things that we often get sort of as a little bit more of a statement rather than a question, but people who are looking to propose more than one proposal for the research challenge or to both of the Mind Matters challenge, what are the criteria around that or specifics?
So that's actually, Casey, we get this question and variations of this question a lot. Mm-hmm. And, the answer is that, to emphasize, we're really interested in receiving as many ideas as are out there. So if your research group is so fruitful that they have several different approaches that they would like to propose, by all means, please put together more than one proposal. You are allowed to submit as many proposals as you guys have ideas for. Similarly, if your group is diverse enough that you can actually bridge both topics and can respond to both the educational programs topic and the research topic, we would welcome submissions from a single group to both. So there really are as few constraints as possible regarding who is eligible to participate.
Great. So this is one that we briefly went over earlier, but just to sort of give another reiteration about what is the deadline to submit a proposal?
So the deadline is coming up. It is January 29th, 2015, and it's amazing that we're already at 2015, but the deadline is coming up. And so, the part of the purpose of running this webinar now is to spur, the thought processes, try to proactively answer questions that we know are likely to come up.
Great. So moving on, number 5, how do I submit my proposal? I have a number of supporting documents and or files I would like to include with my proposal.
Another question that we get a lot of variations on that theme. So if you are registered at 9 sites and you have logged in, you will see a Respond Now button. This button is only visible once you've logged in. If you click on that button, it will take you to a form, an online form. And as I had mentioned several slides earlier, the form actually has different sections, and each section has a couple of lines of direction about what we're looking for. Many respondents find it easier to read through everything and then compose as a separate Word document one continuous proposal from which they can then cut and paste the appropriate sections into the different fields. And, if you have supporting documents, you maybe have resumes, you maybe have video clips, other types of tables of data. There is a section at the very end of the form that allows you to attach all of these additional files. I think the only limit that we have is that you're not allowed to attach more than 10 megabytes. And that really only comes into play if you have, for some reason, a long video clip.
Great. So number 6, is it possible to submit a proposal as a consortia formed by different institutions? And are there any advantages to doing so?
It's definitely possible to do so, and it's definitely something that, we could see how if different groups have different levels or different areas of expertise, that would allow you to, as a group, provide a much more compelling proposal. But there are no advantages to doing so. So, as we mentioned at the first FAQ about being an NCAA member, if you are trying to form an alliance with somebody who is part of the NCAA association, please don't feel obligated to do so simply for the purposes of perhaps gaining an advantage, because there isn't any.
So number 7, sorry, I was out of order there. I'm not sure my approach is within scope for this challenge. How can I get guidance?
So there are 2 ways to get guidance. One is to visit the forum. We've already received several questions about this, and you're welcome to read through the forum to see what other people are asking, and also then to post your own question. And the nice thing about posting your question at the forum is then the larger community has a chance to see what you're thinking. But we also understand that there could be sensitivity, particularly if you're going to ask very specific questions. So in that case, then, we would invite you to contact 9 Sigma directly. And if there are questions that we aren't able to answer, we will definitely bump them forward to the team at the NCAA.
And number 8, what are the rules governing indirect costs?
We have gotten a ton of questions about indirect costs. And actually, in preparation for this webinar, we have been talking with the NCAA to just kind of solidify what the position is. And this information has already, in fact, been posted at the forum. So for the research challenge, which is the topic where we anticipate that this is really going to be a significant issue, the maximum amount of money that will be dispersed for any individual grant is $400,000. And this $400,000 includes the indirect costs. So if you are part of a university that has higher indirect costs, then the amount of money that is available to you to actually perform research will be slightly less. The other thing, of course, is that almost all universities have different levels of indirect costs depending on whether it's a not-for-profit, an organized group, etc. And the NCAA is expecting that your university will be charging the lowest rate, the not-for-profit level of indirect costs.
Great, thank you so much, Eloise. So that concludes our challenge FAQs, but what we will do now is go ahead and move on to the live Q&A. We are going to be opening the session up to any questions from the audience. We've received a number of questions already, but please continue to submit your questions through the Q&A chat box. We'll be taking the rest of the webinar time to answer them live. If we don't get to your questions, please don't worry. Like I said earlier, our Q&A session is being archived, and all questions and answers will be made available on the challenge site following this webinar, along with the recording of the webinar. Oh, sorry. So we're going to go ahead and open it up, and we will apologize in advance. It is all live, so there may be a couple of delays as we move through it. But both Emily and Brian are on the line, and Eloise is here to help direct the questions. So the first question we have.
Yeah,
I'll go ahead. Okay. Yes. Should we also aim to change attitudes and behavior of coaches and administrators?
So I'm going to flip that over to you, Brian, and to you, Emily, and let you guys take this question.
Thanks. This is Brian. We absolutely want to be shifting the behavior and attitudes of coaches, administrators, parents, really look at the entire group of stakeholders, because it's not enough just to target the student athletes. They have to be in a culture that's going to completely support the best efforts to really protect the brain. So everyone is involved, and so it really is a creative approach to finding out how to shift the global culture. And it even extends beyond the coaches. I mean, as Emily pointed out in her slide, and maybe she can comment on this further, I mean, we're really talking about changing society at large.
Yeah, this is Emily. I'll jump in here. I completely agree that there's so many different stakeholders that we can target, and I think successful proposals will look at a range of different levels of influence. The one thing to keep in mind is that the ultimate goal of this is to change safety behaviors, and even if maybe you're not measuring health outcomes years and years down the line, there is a need to connect whatever you're targeting and measuring with the actual some kind of health outcome or health behavior of the athlete. So or at least demonstrating an awareness of how what you're measuring is connected to that.
Great, thank you. So moving on, though this is an NCAA and or DoD sponsored initiative, is there a target population age group for the Educational Programs Challenge other than the college-age student athletes? And as a follow-up, is there a specific target population, and is there a particular sport targeted?
So again, Brian, I will defer to you and to Emily to take a first crack at answering this.
Right, so this is Brian, and really this follows a similar line of thought to the previous question. So although we are targeting young and emerging adults, if you think about it, we're really looking at a continuum here. So I think a successful proposal is going to understand that if we're targeting young and emerging adults, we have to target the continuum of youth going all the way to adulthood. So people don't arrive on a college campus having lived in a vacuum. They're part of a society that is also very much part of an ingrained culture that needs to be changed. So I think a successful proposal will take that in mind. And although we do have, because this is the NCAA and DoD, we have to really completely work with the young and emerging adults. As with everything we're doing at the NCAA, we're looking at the entire continuum. And so again, that gets back to what Emily was talking about. We're really trying to shift society, and that starts with our youth.
And so this is Eloise. Just to follow up on that, I think as Brian has just mentioned, the specific target population is perhaps slightly broader than just the generic college-aged 18 to 22-year-old population, because it represents part of a continuum. With regard to whether or not there's a particular sport targeted, I think the answer is no. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, because in general, we're just looking to change the attitude towards concussion, that it's not something that you just shake off. This is something that's serious, whether you get a concussion because you got knocked down half a flight of stairs, or because you took a hard hit in a soccer game, or because your bike, ran over a curb and you catapulted over the handles. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct.
And this is Emily, if I can just jump in here. There might be a reason why specific proposals might choose to target specific sports. Like you might have a theory-driven reason for, there being a benefit to just focusing on the culture of a very specific sport, but that's certainly not necessary. It kind of stems from what you think would be most impactful.
Great, thank you. So moving on, do you need to be a university to submit, or is it okay to be a for-profit entity?
Again, we're trying to be as broad as possible in our outreach. So you do not need to be a university to respond to either topic. There are lots of organizations out there that are for-profit and not-for-profit that do interesting and relevant work in these areas, and we would love to hear from you.
Do you want a budget submitted?
So a budget is always an interesting thing because for different people, a budget means a different thing. I think that a budget at a top level, so we're not looking for a super line item detailed budget, but just a general budget is a great way to demonstrate that you have a good program lined up so that you thought through what it is that you plan to achieve, how you're going to do it, and what are the costs that are broadly associated with each step. So, you know, yes, we would like to see, and the NCAA would like to see a budget, but we're not necessarily looking for something that is super detailed. I will actually, though, add that odds are excellent that for the educational research program, if you are invited to submit a comprehensive proposal, you will be asked to provide a full-on budget.
And we had an additional question come up as a follow-up to this, and someone is asking if the budget question refers to the second phase, or is there any specifics behind that?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure, because right now anybody who responds is limited to responding through fields that are available in the response forms for each of the two topics. And again, there is a spot where you're invited to provide budget detail, but I'm trying to provide some guidelines about how hard you have to work on that section.
Okay, great. So the DoD was briefly mentioned. Can this research be conducted within the DoD, or is it specific to the NCAA?
Oh, interesting question. Brian, what are your thoughts there?
So the question is, can the research be done through the DoD rather than the NCAA?
Yes.
Yeah, so the way that we had envisioned this is that this would be done through the NCAA, and that would then become information that the DoD could utilize. And the thinking behind that is that we have everything set up really operationally to do this within the NCAA, and there are less sort of hurdles to overcome than if we did this in the military. That would require a whole nother level of you know, getting through different bureaucratic channels. But also, the reason why the Department of Defense believes that we can target the NCAA and they can then gain useful information from this is because when you think about it, the average person who's in college or is a service military man or woman, they're the same age, they're athletic, they're bright, they're risk takers, they push themselves, they like to climb to the edge, and so that's why the DoD is willing to work this through the NCAA. So that's the way it should be done.
Great, thank you. So can you briefly explain how we should answer the point cognitions targeted in the proposed approach question for the educational challenge proposal?
That's definitely something that I'm going to turn over to you, Emily.
Yeah, so for that we're really interested in what are you trying to change? Like what is your educational program? Like what's kind of the mechanism through which you think it's going to be effective? We don't think it's enough to just generally, like, broadly raise awareness about concussions. If you're, you know, what outcome do you think will result? Is it going to be? Do you think, you know, changing specific knowledge? Like, do you think if you think that is an effective strategy, then you need to support that with why from, you know, maybe existing literature, or maybe you think that you are trying to change norms or perceived norms about concussion reporting, or attitudes about a specific type, you know, about risk-taking or help-seeking. There's a range of different things you could be targeting through the educational programming, and we want you to be specific about what that is. And kind of implicit in that is there's some sort of theory and evidence about why this is important and impactful.
Great, thank you. So My company has already created concussion training for our member institutions, over 1,200 K-12 and higher ed schools. For the education challenge, can we submit our current courseware with the notion that we would remove our branding and customize it?
All right, so Brian, what do you think about that?
I think that's fair game.
Okay. Okay. So then so for the group that submitted that question, just to completely clarify, go for it. Absolutely.
If we have not endeavored to do this type of project before, but we have a very strong proposal, would our proposal be considered?
So this really is addressing the issue of the maturity of the proposed approach. And, you know, I'll let Brian and Emily speak to this more directly, but I do want to just kind of make some top-level remarks here. In general, if a proposed approach has not yet had any kind of preliminary work done for it, there's generally some sort of scientific rationale or some sort of analogous data from a separate field that supports why this is a good idea. Why is it that you think it's a strong proposal if you haven't done this type of work before? And you know, that is what I would urge you to focus on. So that's just speaking generally. But Brian and Emily, you know, I definitely would invite you to provide more specific guidance.
Well, Emily, I'll let you lead on this from the research perspective and how we set up criteria for looking at proposals.
All right, well, so we have a very structured criteria of how we're evaluating proposals, and people who have done this type of work before might have an easier time you know, creating a proposal that provides the type of evidence that would really support getting funding. That being said, you know, if you haven't done this type of project before, it's just particularly critical that you do provide a very strong rationale and make it very clear to the reviewers that you have the capability to execute this, and that you have an awareness of the types of, you know, barriers and challenges that you might encounter in doing this. So really a well-communicated proposal that can be submitted by anyone, and it just might be easier for people who've had experience doing this, but certainly that not having that experience shouldn't limit you in submitting.
Okay, great. So moving on, are the research projects expected to be completed in a specific period of time, for example, 1 or 2 years?
So, Brian, I think that this is something that we had discussed a while ago, and, you know, my understanding of this was that for research efforts that show positive success early on, there was the potential for continued funding down the line. It's not guaranteed, but the opportunity exists. Is that something that's still true?
Yes, because I think it might be unrealistic to think that a research project like this, if it really is a great project, could be completed in 1 or 2 years. So realistically, we understand that this may kick out to 3, 4 years, something like that.
Great. I think that's in keeping with the conversations that we have had, where I think in general we all agree that changing behavior, changing attitudes is not a fast process, and it can take, you know, several years before you can determine whether or not you're seeing significant success or not. So excellent. I saw a question scroll by earlier about where you could find the forum, and I just want to stop on that for a quick second so that those of you who have more than one screen available to you as you're participating in this webinar, Casey had given you an address to point to earlier. The shortest way to get there, if you don't have a link to click on, is to go to 9sites.9sigma.com. That's our home page. And when you're there, you'll see that across the top, there's a list of several different places that you can click and one of them is Grand Challenges. I believe it is like the bottom right-hand option on the banner at the top of the screen. If you click on Grand Challenges, a list of several Grand Challenges that are currently open will appear, and if you just click on the NCAA Grand Challenge button, a new window will pop up. This window takes you to the home page that covers both topics. From there you can navigate to either topic. There is a separate forum for each topic. So you'll need to go and pick which topic is the one that you're currently interested in. And when you click on the home page for that topic, the forum will show up on the left-hand side as a clickable spot. So just to kind of give those instructions out.
And additionally, the link will be on the last slide of this. This is being recorded so that if you don't have the opportunity to record a direct link to the challenge website, you can also find it on we will be sending this out in an email as well to everybody, the recorded email, but also following Eloise's steps to get to 9 sites, and then the specific challenge forum, talent challenge page, and the 2 specific challenge forums is another great way to find all of this information. So we're going to keep rolling through. We have just about 12 minutes left in the webinar, so we'll go ahead and answer a few more questions, and then we'll do a quick wrap up about 5 minutes to the hour. So moving on, we'll do can the proposal be directed towards supporting sports that may not be NCAA sanctioned? And that is, they give examples of the MMA and or karate.
Wow, I have no idea. Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
I think for the purposes of what we're trying to accomplish, the very strong preference would be to target the NCAA sports. And there are a lot of them. I mean, that's, you're approaching 29 sports there, but the other sorts of things, like boxing and other kinds of fighting, that's such a different culture, and so I think it would be less appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish.
Great, thank you. So we had, this is a pretty lengthy question, but it's very interesting. So the title of the request states, in quotes, attitudes, and yet the description of the challenge states change in the culture and behavior is key. Attitudes and behaviors don't always align. What are you most interested in seeing, changes in attitudes or changes in behavior?
Oh, great question. Brian, what are your thoughts here?
I'm going to turn that over to Emily.
So ultimately, the goal is to change behavior. I mean, really the ultimate goal is to change health outcomes, and the mechanism that we're interested in is changing safety behaviors, and safety behaviors by athletes or by coaches or others who are directly influencing athlete health. We in the title of this challenge, we're emphasizing attitudes because we think that that's one important pathway through which we can change behaviors, and it's one that maybe hasn't been targeted as completely in existing educational efforts that have been focused more on changing concussion knowledge. But there can certainly be other, you might identify other pathways to change behavior. So, for example, perceived norms has been identified as one important pathway, and so attitudes, we're using that as more of a inclusive stand-in for a range of different cognitions that are related to the culture of sport, the culture of safety that we think can impact safety behaviors.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Emily. So we have 2 different questions that are basically about scope. So I'm going to go ahead and read through them and try and combine them just so that we can, I believe that the answer is going to be appropriate for both. So we have someone asking about whether or not research done to impact the impact of concussions on the brain of a young animal models, if that would be appropriate, and or also a proposal suggesting targeting children at an earlier age. Would either of these be within the scope of this challenge?
So I'm going to take a crack at answering this, and then if I am contradicted, then we'll know that you know, the scope is actually even wider than we had thought. So the answer here is that for both cases, the answer is that it's probably outside the scope of this. You know, the goal, as Emily and Brian have been saying all along, is to try to change the attitude and consequently the behavior of young and emerging adults with regards to concussion. And so we're really looking for two things, either ways to affect that change or ways to kind of get the message out. All right, that's really what those two topics are about. And so looking at animal models or targeting children at an earlier age are probably outside the scope of this. But, you know, of course, I am ready to be corrected, Brian and Emily.
Nothing to correct.
Same here.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to just provide one last question, then we'll do a wrap-up because we are getting toward the end of the time. This is a real quick one, I believe. So who is on the Proposal Review Committee?
So the Proposal Review Committee is an internal NCAA group, and the committee and actually if you go to visit the terms and conditions for the challenges, again, you'll need to navigate, as I indicated earlier, through the 9sites.9sigma.com to find the NCAA Grand Challenge page. But if you do that and click on the terms and conditions, you'll see that there's very explicitly in the terms and conditions a section that talks about the review committee and the methods by which the evaluation will occur. So it is going to be reviewed by a group that is internal to the NCAA.
Great. Thank you so much, Eloise. So with just a few minutes left, I'm going to go ahead and start the wrap-up of this webinar. Again, thank you everybody for that engaging Q&A session. As stated earlier, any questions not answered live will be available along with a recording of this webinar in the challenge forum. You can find it in the way that Eloise had previously mentioned and also through the direct link that will be provided on the next slide. So what can you do today? So of course, visiting the website to get as much information as possible is always helpful. It will be mindmatterschallenge.org, or you can find it, again, the way that Eloise had instructed earlier. On that website, you can register to receive updates, view the FAQs, and then join the community so that you can ask your own questions within that forum. You'll want to stay connected, again, at that community forum. And then, of course, you want to submit your proposal. The deadline for submissions, again, is January 29th, 2015. We just have a few more weeks for that. If there are any questions regarding that, please feel free to submit them during the, again, on the online form, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Again, I want to thank you, everybody, for your time and expertise in this matter. This is going to conclude our webinar for this morning. Again, one last reminder that this webinar has been recorded and will be made available on the challenge site along with the Q&A transcript, which will include any unanswered questions that have occurred during the session. Thank you all for attending, and again, thank you to our speakers. We appreciate your time and we look forward to receiving your submissions. Have a great day.